office, my heart pounding against my ribs. The air was thick with tension. My parents were already seated, their faces stretched into smug smiles. My father, Charles, leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. My mother, Vivian, glanced at me with thinly veiled disdain. She had always looked at me like I was a mistake. I was the unwanted child, the daughter who never measured up to their expectations. But it didn't matter. Today wasn't about them. Today was about my Aunt Eleanor. Eleanor had been the only one who ever treated me with kindness. When my parents sneered at my dreams and belittled my choices, Eleanor encouraged me. She would always say, "Sophia, you have something they will never understand, a heart." And yet, here I was, watching the very people who despised me act as if they deserved everything she had. The lawyer, an older man with silver-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat and shuffled some papers. Let's get started. As you all know, Miss Eleanor had amassed considerable wealth, with assets totaling $10 million. My father smirked, nudging my mother. "I told you, Vivian. It's ours." I swallowed hard. I knew they never loved Eleanor. They only tolerated her because of her money. And now, they thought they were about to reap the benefits. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and continued, "Before we proceed, I must read a personal statement from Miss Eleanor." He unfolded a handwritten letter and began to read. "To my beloved niece, Sophia." My mother scoffed loudly. "Oh, please." The lawyer's eyes flickered toward her before continuing. "I have watched you grow into a woman of integrity, strength, and kindness. I have always admired you, even when others did not. I made my decision long ago, and I have no regrets. My wealth is not meant for those who value greed over love. My fortune will go to the only person I trust to honor it, Sophia." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. Then my father shot up from his seat, his face turning red with fury. "What?" My mother gasped, gripping the chair's arms as if it would steady her. This has to be a mistake." I sat there, frozen. Did I hear that correctly? Eleanor left everything to me? Before I could even react, my father's hand lashed out, grabbing my wrist. His nails dug into my skin. "You ungrateful brat," he hissed. This was supposed to be OURS. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. He yanked me up from my seat and shoved me toward the door. "You think you deserve this?" he bellowed, his voice shaking with rage. "You're just a naive girl. You wouldn't even know what to do with that kind of money." "Charles, stop this." The lawyer interjected, but my father ignored him. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip tight, and then did something I never thought he would. He threw me out, right in front of everyone. I stumbled, nearly falling onto the cold marble floor. Gasps echoed in the room. Even my mother looked shocked, but she didn't stop him. And then, in the most venomous tone, he sneered, "You are nothing without us." The lawyer's voice cut through the tension, his tone sharp. "Mr. Charles, I suggest you take a seat before you do something you regret." I looked up, my vision blurred by unshed tears. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. I was done. And they had no idea what was coming. I steadied myself, swallowing the lump of emotion clawing at my throat. My father's words echoed in my mind, but they no longer had the same power over me. The lawyer cleared his throat, glaring at my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster, I highly advise you to compose yourselves. There is more to this will that you need to hear." My father scoffed. "More? What more could there possibly be?" His face was still red, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked like a man who had just been robbed in broad daylight. The lawyer gave him a look of utter disappointment and continued. "Miss Eleanor was well aware of how this would play out. She anticipated your reaction, Mr. Lancaster. And so, she included one final statement." He picked up another page, his voice unwavering as he read. "To Charles and Vivian Lancaster, I know you came here expecting to take what you never earned. I know your greed knows no bounds, and for that, I have left you exactly what you deserve, nothing." My mother gasped. My father looked like someone had just struck him across the face. But where her family? My mother's voice cracked. The lawyer ignored her and continued. Furthermore, I have legally ensured that neither of you will contest this will. Should you attempt to do so, every single asset will be donated to charity, and you will receive not a single penny. That was it. The final blow. My parents collapsed back into their chairs, their faces drained of color. My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. I took a deep breath, standing tall. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on the receiving end of their cruelty. I turned toward them, my voice steady. You always told me I was nothing, that I was worthless. And yet here we are. I'm the one Aunt Eleanor trusted. Not you. My father shot up again, his hands trembling with rage. You little. That's enough, the lawyer said firmly, standing up. Mr. Lancaster, I'll have to ask you to leave if you cannot conduct yourself properly. For once in his life, my father was silent. I turned toward the door, but just before I stepped out, I glanced back. My father's sneer was gone. My mother's smugness had crumbled. They weren't towering figures anymore. They were just desperate, greedy people who had finally lost everything. And for the first time, I walked away, knowing I didn't owe them anything. I stepped out of the law office, my breath shaky but controlled. My father's words, his sneers, his betrayal, it was all still fresh in my mind. But something else had replaced the pain. A quiet, burning fire. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shackled by their control. I wasn't the scared girl they could manipulate anymore. Aunt Eleanor had freed me in ways I never expected. I tightened my coat around me as the cold wind brushed against my skin. I had just inherited $10 million, and yet I stood alone in the middle of the city, with no one to call family. I pulled out my phone, hesitating. There was one person who had always been there for me, my best friend, Claire. She had been my rock during all the years my parents put me through hell. If anyone deserved to know what had just happened, it was her. Before I could dial, the heavy doors of the law office slammed open behind me. I turned just in time to see my father storming out, his face twisted in rage. You listen to me, Sophia, he growled, his voice sharp enough to cut through the winter air. You think this changes anything? You're still that naive little girl who has no idea how the real world works. I clenched my fists, but forced myself to stay calm. No, Dad. I'm not naive anymore. I see you for what you are now. He laughed bitterly. And what's that? A man who lost everything because of his own greed. His jaw tightened. You don't deserve that money. Neither do you, I shot back. His nostrils flared, but before he could spew another insult, my mother rushed out after him, grabbing his arm. Charles, let's go. We need to figure out what to do next. That was it. They had lost. And for the first time, they were feeling the consequences of their actions. I turned away and walked down the sidewalk, my heart beating faster with every step. I was free. By the time I reached my apartment, my mind was spinning. I sat on my couch, staring at the ceiling. $10 million. It felt surreal. But I wasn't just rich now. I had power. And I had a choice. I could let this money change me, let it turn me into someone like my parents, or I could use it to do something meaningful. My phone buzzed. It was Claire. Hey, Soph. I just heard what happened. Are you okay? I smiled a little at the concern in her voice. I think so. It's just a lot. Well, duh. You just inherited a fortune. So what are you going to do first? Buy a mansion? A yacht? Oh. What about a personal chef? I laughed, shaking my head. I don't know, Claire. I don't think I want to go on some shopping spree. She was quiet for a moment before asking, Then what do you want to do? I leaned back, exhaling slowly. I want to help people. Aunt Eleanor was the only person who was ever kind to me. I think I want to continue that. Claire's voice softened. I think she'd be proud of you. I smiled. Yeah, I think so too. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of missed calls from my parents. I didn't answer. Instead, I called the lawyer. Mr. Callahan, I said as soon as he picked up. I want to start making some changes. He chuckled. I had a feeling you would. What do you have in mind? I thought about all the times I had been left in the cold, with no one to turn to. The countless nights of crying myself to sleep because my own parents made me feel worthless. I want to start a foundation, I said firmly, for kids who come from toxic families. A place where they can get support, education, and a fresh start. There was a pause, then a smile in his voice. Miss Lancaster, I think that's an excellent idea. I knew it was only a matter of time before my parents tried something drastic. And I was right. Later that evening, there was a loud, frantic knock on my door. I already knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. I hesitated, then opened the door. My mother stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide with desperation. My father was behind her, looking just as broken. The confidence, the arrogance gone. Sophia, my mother breathed. We need to talk. I crossed my arms.
Oh, about what?
How you threw me out. How you tried to take something that was never yours. My father gritted his teeth. We made a mistake. I let out a dry laugh. A mistake?
No.
A mistake is spilling coffee. What you did was betray your own daughter. My mother clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Please, Sophia. We have nothing left. I stared at her unmoved. And whose fault is that? Tears welled in her eyes. We're still your parents. No, I said firmly. You stopped being my parents the moment you threw me out. I saw it then, the realization in their eyes. That they had lost me for good. My father, the man who once towered over me like an unshakable force, suddenly looked small, desperate, helpless. And it was their own doing. I took a step back. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad. And with that, I closed the door. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about everything, about how my life had changed overnight, about the choices I had made. And then I realized something. I had power now. And not just financial power, but emotional power. I could either let my parents rot in their own misery, or I could show them something they never showed me. Mercy. The next morning, I made a call to my lawyer. I want to set up a trust, I said. For whom? I sighed. For my parents. There was a long pause. Are you sure about that, Miss Lancaster? I nodded to myself.
Yes.
But under one condition. And that is, they get a small allowance, just enough to survive. But they will never have control over it. They will never be able to manipulate it. The lawyer chuckled. You really are your aunt's niece. I smiled softly. Maybe. I didn't do it because they deserved it. I did it because I deserved peace. And there was nothing more satisfying than knowing they had to live every day knowing that the daughter they once deemed naive was now the only reason they weren't on the streets. That was the ultimate revenge. Not cruelty. Not revenge through suffering, but through kindness. Because they would never understand it. And that in itself was justice. After I set up the trust fund for my parents, I felt a strange sense of closure. I didn't forgive them, not yet, maybe not ever, but I had taken away their power to hurt me. That was enough. As I sat in my new office, a space I had rented for my foundation, I looked around at the small beginnings of what would become something great. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal, but the dream was alive. Claire sat across from me, grinning. I still can't believe you did that. I raised an eyebrow. Did what? Set up a trust for them. After everything they did to you. She shook her head in disbelief. I would have let them rot. I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. That's the thing, Claire. If I let them rot, I become like them. And I refuse to let them have that kind of control over me. She studied me for a moment, then smiled. You're a better person than me. I chuckled. Or just a smarter one. We both laughed, but deep down I knew the real reason I did it. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for me. A few days passed, and I focused entirely on my foundation. I met with financial advisors, charity organizers, and social workers. Everything was falling into place. Until I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello. A familiar, raspy voice slithered through the phone. Sophia. I stiffened. Dad. There was silence. Then, a deep breath. We need to meet. I scoffed. We really don't. Please. I frowned. My father had never begged before. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe, away from the high-end places my parents used to frequent. He looked different, tired, defeated, smaller. He tapped his fingers against the table, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. What do you want? I asked, getting straight to the point. He sighed. Your mother, she's struggling with this. She thinks we can fix things. I tilted my head. And what do you think? His eyes darkened. I think you've made a mistake. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Excuse me? You think you've won, Sophia? His voice was low, controlled, but there was something dangerous beneath it. You think that because you have money you're safe? I narrowed my eyes. Are you threatening me?
He smirked.
I'm just saying, money doesn't erase family. I leaned in, my voice steady. You're right. It doesn't. But it does erase your control over me. His smirk faltered. I stood up. This conversation is over. He called after me, his voice carrying a final warning. You may have everything now, Sophia, but don't forget where you came from. I walked out without looking back. I wasn't the scared little girl he could manipulate anymore. The days passed and I threw myself into my foundation. But something gnawed at me. My father's words. One night, I got a call from Claire. Hey, she said hesitantly. I don't want to freak you out, but I think you should see this. She sent me a link. It was an article. Billionaire heiress Sophia Lancaster accused of stealing family fortune. My blood ran cold. I clicked the article. My parents had gone to the media. They were claiming I had manipulated my aunt, coerced her into changing the will, and stolen what was rightfully theirs. Claire's voice was gentle. This is bad, sophomore. I clenched my fists. No, Claire. This is war. I knew my parents were desperate, but I hadn't expected them to go this far. I called Mr. Callahan, my lawyer. I saw the article, he said before I even spoke. Don't worry. It's all false claims. They have no legal standing. That doesn't mean they won't ruin my reputation, I muttered. He sighed. There's an option. We can sue them for defamation. I hesitated. Did I really want to take this public?
No.
I wanted to end this quietly. I have a better idea, I said. I was going to beat them at their own game. I contacted a journalist, a well-respected one. I provided them with every piece of evidence I had, messages, letters, recordings of my parents berating me. I didn't want to destroy them. I just wanted the world to know the truth. The article went live a week later. The dark truth behind the Lancaster fortune, a daughter's fight for justice. The internet exploded. Public opinion turned against my parents instantly. And just like that, their power was gone. I met them one last time. They were waiting in a hotel lobby, their faces pale. My father glared at me. You've humiliated us. I crossed my arms.
No.
You humiliated yourselves. My mother sobbed. We just wanted to use me. I interrupted. To control me? They didn't answer. I sighed, looking at them one last time. I gave you a chance. A trust fund. A way to survive. But if you ever try to destroy me again, I will take even that away. My father clenched his jaw, but he knew it was over. I walked away. And this time, I never looked back. With my parents out of my life, I finally focused on what mattered, my foundation. We opened our first shelter a few months later. I stood in the lobby, watching as young people walked in, looking for a safe place. One girl, no older than 16, hesitated at the entrance. I walked over, smiling.
Hey.
What's your name? She looked up at me, fear in her eyes. Emily. You're safe here, Emily, I said gently. Tears welled in her eyes. Really? I nodded. Really? She broke down, sobbing into my shoulder. And at that moment I knew I had won. Not because of the money. Not because of revenge, but because I had chosen to be better. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The foundation gained traction quickly, thanks to the public support generated after the article exposed my parents' lies. Donations poured in and people reached out, wanting to help. I barely had time to think about my parents anymore. I had moved past them. But one morning, as I was reviewing plans for a second shelter, an email popped up. Subject: you won, but at what cost? I hesitated before clicking. It was from my father. You think you destroyed us? You didn't. You just made sure we'd never recover. You've made us the villains of a story we should have been the heroes of. Enjoy your money, Sophia. But know this, you're alone now. And that's something money can't fix. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. For a second, I almost believed him. But then I heard Claire's voice from behind me. Hey, you okay? I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her eyes filled with concern. I exhaled.
Yeah.
Just my dad trying to make me feel guilty. She scoffed. Classic narcissist move. Let me guess, he's the victim now. I let out a short laugh. Pretty much. She sat across from me, crossing her arms. You know he's wrong, right? You're not alone. I looked at her, really looked at her. Claire had been my family long before my parents ever stopped pretending to be. I smiled. I know. And just like that, the weight lifted. One afternoon, I was finalizing some expansion plans when the receptionist called me. Miss Lancaster, there's someone here to see you. I frowned. Who is it? There was hesitation. She says she's your mother. I felt my heart skip a beat. After everything, why would she come here? I walked to the lobby, my heels clicking against the floor, my mind racing. And then I saw her. Vivian Lancaster, once a woman of poise and arrogance, now looked defeated. Her clothes were neat but worn, her face thinner than I remembered. Mom, I said, my voice colder than I intended. She turned to me, her eyes searching mine. Sophia. I crossed my arms. What do you want? She swallowed. Can we talk? I sighed and led her to a private meeting room. She sat across from me, fidgeting with her hands, something I had never seen her do before. Why are you here? I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, I don't know who I am without the money. I blinked. That wasn't what I expected. She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something genuine in her expression. Regret. I spent so many years believing that wealth defined me. That power made me important. But now, she looked down at her hands. I have nothing, and it's terrifying. I stayed silent, letting her speak. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, voice breaking. But I did. I was a coward. I let your father treat you horribly, and I never stopped him. And now I don't even know how to fix it. I studied her carefully. This wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was something. Mom, I said softly. What do you want from me? She looked up, her eyes filled with unshed tears. I don't know. I just wanted to see you. I sighed. You can't undo the past. And I'm not going to pretend it never happened. She nodded, her lips trembling. But I continued. If you really want to change, you'll have to prove it. Her breath hitched.
How?
I leaned forward. Do something good. Not for me. For someone else. Find a purpose beyond money. If you can do that, maybe we can have a conversation someday. She wiped her eyes and nodded. Okay. As she left, I felt something unexpected. Not anger. Not revenge. But the smallest flicker of hope. A few months passed. My foundation was thriving. We had opened our second shelter, and our programs were helping dozens of young people escape toxic households. Then, one evening, Claire burst into my office, holding her phone. You won't believe this, she said, showing me an article. I read the headline. Former socialite Vivian Lancaster spotted volunteering at local soup kitchen. I blinked. What? Claire smirked. Looks like she actually listened to you. I exhaled, unsure how to feel. Had my mother really changed? I didn't know. But for the first time in my life, I was willing to find out. One rainy afternoon, I found myself standing in front of Aunt Eleanor's grave. I placed a bouquet of white lilies on the stone, running my fingers over her name. "Hey, Eleanor," I whispered. "I hope I've made you proud." The wind rustled through the trees, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. I had spent so much of my life searching for love in the wrong places. But now I understood. Family wasn't about blood. It was about the people who stood by you when everything fell apart. And I wasn't alone. I never had been. A year later, my foundation had grown into a movement. I stood on stage at our annual gala, looking out at the people who had become my new family, Claire, my team, the young people we had helped. I took a deep breath, gripping the microphone. When I was younger, I thought power meant money. That status meant everything. But I've learned that true power is kindness. Applause erupted, but I wasn't doing this for recognition. I was doing it because I had finally found my purpose. And as I stepped off that stage, I knew I had won. Not by wealth, not by